That's what Trump expected to happen. That is what he expected to happen. He was bragging about that yesterday, Tuesday. That's what's supposed to happen. Why is that what is supposed to happen? Because when there's a big stock sell-off, people historically take their proceeds and park it in the bond market. They buy bonds. Because the bond market is so stable and dependable, and because it's the bond market of the United States, and the United States pays its debts. That's what's supposed to happen. That's not what happened over the last week. And the running theory among a lot of economists that I've been looking at and listening to today is that because globally, people are looking at the United States as a bad risk, as a bad bet, and they don't want any of their money invested in the United States. And because when people sell off stocks, they get a big chunk of money, they park it in the bond market. When a lot of people do that, bond prices go up, which drives their return rate down. And that's what Donald Trump expected to happen and wanted to happen so that he could refinance America's other debt at a lower interest rate. But because people sold everything off and didn't put their money in the bond market, that drove bond prices down, which drove their return rate up. Because in order to sell them, when people aren't buying them, you have to make them more attractive. And how do you do that? You jack up the return rate on their investment. It's not what happened this time. That is basic economics, because that's what has always happened in the past. But Donald Trump has so damaged the brand of America, and he has so damaged the brand of United States government debt. He's a guy who doesn't pay his bills. And people no longer trust the American financial markets. And people no longer trust the American bond market. They no longer trust that the United States is going to pay its debts. And so they're just taking it all out and they're putting it other places. They're putting it overseas. They're putting it in Europe and Asia and Latin America. And, you know, I mean, Donald Trump took this risk. He took this gamble for that reason, because he's like, this is going to drive those bond interest rates down. I'll be able to refinance the debt at a lower value, and we'll reorder the entire global economy and do away with globalism. And exactly the opposite happened. And yesterday, last night, the bond rates spiked because nobody was buying them. So they had to jack up the rates. And which is the exact opposite of what Trump expected to happen and what he wanted to happen. And when that happened, he had to cave. He had to cave. And he had to come up with a way to do it while as claiming victory. 75 nations have called the White House begging for a trade deal, begging for trade deals. They're begging me. They're begging me. When the few nations who have called have said none of the trade representatives are even calling us back to talk. And this, despite him painting it as a victory, and despite his brain-dead, fart-huffing, mouth-breathing morons 100% accepting it as a victory, this was a massive loss for Donald Trump. Because not only did he completely tank the markets for a week, they're still down over 5,000 points from where they were in February. The Dow is. Yeah, they came back 3,000 points today. They were down by 8,000 points. So great, you had a 3,000 point day. That's awesome. It's still down by 5,000 points of where it was in February. It's gone down even more than that since December. And he lost. He gambled and he lost. But it's not just, the loss isn't just trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of value in the stock market that he's wiped out. He has so damaged America's standing in the world, and you know the stability and dependability of America's financial markets, specifically the bond market, that nobody's going to buy these bonds anymore. And, I heard one economist say that they think China is selling off U.S. treasuries. They're selling off our debt that they own. And so, and they own something like $800 or $900 billion of America's debt. And if they decided they wanted to dump all of that at once, prices would absolutely plummet and the rates would skyrocket. And there would be nothing that we could do about that. This was something we could do about, because Trump did it single-handedly on purpose to drive those rates down, and instead they went up. I mean, he has completely fucked American trade on a global scale and America's financial markets and the American bond market for a decade in 1 week. The announcement of these tariffs lasted for 1 week. The tariffs themselves went into effect last night at midnight and lasted for 13 hours before he yanked them. Who's going to depend on that when they're investing money in the United States? Nobody.